These spiritual signs show you're shifting to a timeline of a huge reward. There are moments in life when the air feels heavier, the light looks different, and even the silence seems to hum with meaning. These are not ordinary moments. These are signals that something much deeper is unfolding, something cosmic, something beyond your current understanding of reality. You may not realize it, but when you're on the verge of a major spiritual shift, the universe begins to speak in a language only your soul can understand. It whispers through synchronicities, nudges through discomfort, and sometimes shouts through chaos. And if you're watching this, if these words are finding you right now, then you are not here by accident. You are shifting timelines. And not just any timeline, you're aligning with a timeline of a massive, life-altering reward. But here's the truth that most people won't tell you. Before the reward comes the unraveling. Before the breakthrough comes the breakdown. And before the light comes the shadow. This isn't about fantasy or wishful thinking. This is about energetic alignment. Every decision you've made, every belief you've held, every emotion you've carried, it's all been shaping your personal reality, or what we call your timeline. But here's the wild part. There are infinite versions of you, each existing on a different timeline. There's a version of you who gave up. There's a version who played safe. But there's also a version who kept going, who awakened, who received the reward that was always meant for them. And right now, you are shifting closer to becoming that version. That's why things might feel strange. That's why the ground beneath your feet feels like it's cracking, not to destroy you, but to rebuild you.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
One of the first spiritual signs that you're entering this new, rewarding timeline is that your old life starts to feel wrong. Not bad, just off. The people around you, the conversations you used to enjoy, the goals you once chased, they all begin to lose their flavor. You start to feel a weird disconnection from the familiar, like you're watching your life from the outside. This is not a sign that you're broken. It's a sign that you're outgrowing your current frequency. You're no longer energetically aligned with the old version of you, and your soul is giving you the signal. It's time to move. You may feel lost, but in truth, you are simply in between timelines. The old one is crumbling, and the new one has not fully formed. This space in between, it's sacred. It's where transformation lives. You may also begin to experience what I call timeline tremors. These are moments that feel like glitches in the matrix, repeating numbers, strange dreams, intense déjà vu, or sudden, powerful emotional waves that appear out of nowhere. These tremors are not random. They are spiritual downloads. They are your higher self communicating with you, preparing you for the shift. And while they may feel uncomfortable, overwhelming, even they are signs that you are close. So close. The universe is recalibrating your external world to match the internal shift that's already begun. But here's the part that most people miss. You have to participate in this shift. You have to align intentionally. This means letting go of what no longer resonates. And that's one of the most painful parts of the shift. People you love may fall away. Opportunities you once prayed for may dissolve. Habits that comforted you might now suffocate you. And it hurts. It really does. But this isn't punishment. This is the universe clearing space. Because where you're going, you can't carry the weight of who you used to be. If you're brave enough to let go, if you're wise enough to trust the process, you'll begin to make room for what's coming. And what's coming is bigger than you can imagine. Another spiritual sign that you're stepping into the reward timeline is that your intuition becomes louder. You begin to know things without knowing how you know them. You feel drawn to people, places, and ideas that don't make logical sense but feel right. Your dreams become more vivid. You begin to notice patterns in your life that you used to overlook. This is your inner compass turning on, guiding you toward the timeline where everything aligns. But you must listen. And listening requires stillness. It requires stepping away from the noise of the world and tuning into the frequency of your own soul. And here's a truth that very few are willing to face. The timeline of the reward doesn't always start with joy. Sometimes it starts with loss. Sometimes it looks like everything falling apart. But that's only because the universe is moving pieces behind the scenes, reordering reality in your favor. What feels like rejection is often redirection. What feels like chaos is often divine construction. And what feels like the end is often the beginning of the timeline you were born to walk. So let me ask you something that only your soul can answer. What if the discomfort you're feeling right now is not a problem to solve, but a signal to follow? What if the very thing you're resisting is the gatekeeper to your next timeline? You must understand spiritual rewards are not random. They are earned in silence, in surrender, in the unseen moments when you choose faith over fear, alignment over approval, and inner truth over outer comfort. The reward is not just material, though it may come in that form. The real reward is embodiment. It's waking up one day and realizing that you didn't just survive, you transformed. That you didn't just shift timelines, you became the timeline. You became the version of you that was always waiting for your return. If your reality feels like it's bending, if your emotions are heightened, if your routines are crumbling, and your soul is louder than ever, you're not losing your mind. You're shifting timelines, and the reward, it's already on the way. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of alignment. It's a matter of readiness. And you, my friend, are being prepared for something extraordinary. The moment everything feels wrong right before it goes right, there is a sacred tension that exists in the space between who you were and who you are becoming. It's not always dramatic or loud. Sometimes it's subtle. You wake up one day and suddenly the colors of your life seem muted. The things that once sparked excitement now feel like an echo from a different version of you. You begin to question everything, not because you're lost, but because you're waking up. This is the moment when everything feels wrong right before it goes right. And it's one of the most misunderstood stages in the timeline shift towards something extraordinary. You see, when your soul is aligning with a higher frequency, your external world doesn't immediately match that shift. It lags behind. That's why things start to feel off. It's not that your path is broken, it's that your consciousness is accelerating faster than your circumstances. You're outgrowing the shell of your old life, but the new one hasn't fully arrived yet. This liminal space is not a mistake. It's a test, a portal, a purification. And it's in this uncomfortable in-between that many people give up, turn back, or numb out. But if you can hold steady, if you can breathe through the discomfort and trust that something is being built beyond your view, you'll begin to see signs that the shift is real. These signs don't always look like blessings at first. In fact, they often disguise themselves as disruption. You might lose a job, end a relationship, fall into a period of financial instability, or feel like your identity is dissolving. But what if these aren't failures? What if they are necessary endings, soul-level contractions before the expansion? The universe will often strip away what no longer serves you, not out of cruelty, but because it knows what's coming. It knows that you can't take old energy into a new timeline. So it removes the decaying foundations to make space for something truer, deeper, and more aligned with the version of you that's emerging. One of the clearest indicators that you're shifting is when you begin to feel an emotional intensity without clear reason. Your nervous system becomes more sensitive. You might cry more often, feel bursts of joy followed by sorrow, or experience strange moments of peace in the middle of chaos. This isn't instability, it's energetic detox. Your field is recalibrating. Imagine your soul as a radio tuning into a new station. There will be static, distortion, and fragments of old programs fading out. But eventually, if you stay with it, the signal becomes clear. And when it does, you'll realize that the emotional turmoil wasn't breakdown, it was alignment. This is the moment where spiritual discipline becomes crucial. Not discipline in the punishing, rigid sense, but in the sense of deep commitment to your own becoming. Can you stay grounded when everything feels uncertain? Can you still honor your intuition when the world around you questions your choices? Can you trust that the reward is real even before you see it? These are the questions that define the chosen ones, the awakened ones. Because truthfully, anyone can believe when things are going well. But it takes spiritual strength to believe when everything feels like it's falling apart. And here's the paradox: the closer you get to the reward timeline, the more intense the resistance becomes. This is not a glitch, it's a final test. Because the old version of you, the one built on fear, scarcity, and ego, senses its end. And it will throw everything it can to pull you back into the familiar. That's why you'll be tempted to go back to old habits, old relationships, old ways of thinking. But if you can pause and observe rather than react, you'll start to see the illusion for what it is. It isn't real. It's a projection of your past self trying to survive. But you're not here to survive anymore. You're here to thrive. So ask yourself, what are you willing to let die in order for your true self to be born? Because no transformation happens without sacrifice. And the timeline of your highest reward demands your total presence, your deepest surrender, and your unwavering faith. Not faith in some external outcome, but faith in your alignment with the divine intelligence that guides all things. There will be a moment, a quiet, almost imperceptible moment when the wrongness fades. When you wake up and feel a new peace, even if nothing external has changed yet. That's the moment the new timeline locks in. That's the moment your energy has shifted so completely that reality must follow. It's the spiritual law of resonance. What you are within, you attract without. And when your soul finally says yes fully, without doubt the universe responds with a yes so powerful, it rewrites your entire life. This is not just a theory. This is a lived experience. And if you're here, if you're resonating with these words, then you're already in motion. The shift has begun. You've already said yes at some deep level. Now your only task is to keep choosing it even when it's hard, even when it's lonely, even when it feels like nothing is working. because beneath the surface, everything is working. Everything is aligning. And soon, the reward will no longer be a vision, it will be your reality. The collapse of the old you is the birth of the real you. There comes a time on this path where the unraveling becomes undeniable. You can no longer pretend to be who you used to be, and the mask becomes too heavy. The roles you've played no longer fit. The identity you built sometimes over decades begins to crack and fall away. And as terrifying as it feels, this is the most sacred part of the shift. Because the collapse of the old you is not a failure. It's not a regression. It's the first breath of your real self finally being born. This collapse often comes with confusion. You may find yourself asking, "Who am I now?" Or "What do I even want?" And for a time, the answers may not come. You might feel like a blank canvas wiped clean of all that once gave your life shape. But this is not emptiness. This is pure potential. This is the space where your highest self begins to reintroduce itself not through thought, but through feeling. You'll start to feel drawn to new things. You may lose interest in chasing what others told you was success. You may begin to crave simplicity, truth, and alignment more than applause, approval, or achievement. This is not you giving up. This is you waking up. In the old timeline, you likely learned to survive by adopting identities that kept you safe. You became the achiever, the caretaker, the rebel, the perfectionist, whatever role helped you navigate your early life. But now, in this shift, those roles start to crumble. And it hurts, because they once protected you. But they are no longer needed. You no longer need to be who you were to receive love, to be safe, or to feel worthy. The collapse forces you to surrender those masks and finally meet the raw, unfiltered truth of who you are beyond them. And here's the truth. The real you is not something you create. It's something you remember. It's something you recover from beneath the layers of programming, fear, and conditioning. That's why the spiritual path can feel like a death. Because in many ways it is. It's the death of illusion, the death of projection, the death of the small self that believed its worth was tied to external outcomes. And in its place, something vast begins to emerge, something ancient, something divine. You begin to feel yourself not as a personality, but as a presence, not as a name, but as a force. This rebirth is not always dramatic, but sometimes it's a quiet shift in how you walk through the world, or a softening, a deepening. You begin to speak less but say more. You begin to listen not just with your ears, but with your entire being. You stop chasing and start attracting. You stop reacting and start responding. And most of all, you stop abandoning yourself to belong to places you've outgrown. You no longer beg to be seen, because now you see yourself, and that changes everything. But don't rush this process. Don't try to skip the grief that comes with letting go of who you were. Honor it. Mourn it. Thank that version of you for getting you this far, because they did. That version of you endured, survived, adapted, and carried hope, even when it was buried under pain. And now, you're being asked to take the baton and move forward not from duty, but from destiny. So I ask you, with all sincerity, can you love yourself through your own collapse? Can you hold yourself with compassion when the world no longer recognizes you and you barely recognize yourself? Because this is the rite of passage. This is the sacred fire. And you don't come out of it weaker, you come out of it forged. What emerges on the other side is not a better version of your ego. It's a truer embodiment of your soul. And when that soul begins to lead your life, everything changes. Relationships shift, opportunities appear, resources flow, miracles unfold. Not because the external world suddenly becomes perfect, but because your internal world is finally in harmony. You become the timeline, you become the reward. This is the version of you that receives everything you once prayed for. There comes a moment quiet, unexpected, when the dust finally settles. You've walked through the fire, you've let go of what no longer served you, and you've mourned the identities that once protected you but could no longer carry the weight of your awakening. And now, in a still moment, you begin to feel it. Something has shifted. Not outside of you, but within. You aren't who you used to be. You aren't searching like before. You aren't chasing. You're simply being. And yet, this state of being is so powerful, so magnetic, that the very reality around you begins to bend in response. This is the version of you that receives everything you once prayed for, not because you fought for it, but because you aligned with it. You see, the reward was never about a single event. It was never just the money, the partner, the healing, or the breakthrough. It was always about who you had to become in order to hold those things. The prayer was never unanswered, it was unfolding. And now it's arriving, not as a miracle falling from the sky, but as a reflection of who you've become. You've done the inner work. You've sat with your shadows. You've walked in integrity even when it was hard. You've chosen truth over comfort, alignment over applause. And the universe has been watching, not in judgment, but in readiness. Because when you shift, everything shifts. And now, the reward is inevitable. This version of you doesn't beg. It doesn't shrink. It doesn't explain or justify. It simply exists in its fullness, and that fullness begins to attract everything that once felt impossible. The connections that come now are effortless. The opportunities feel aligned. The abundance flows not because you're hustling, but because you're resonating at the frequency of your desires. You've become the embodiment of the future you once dreamed of. You're no longer daydreaming about a new timeline. You're living inside it. But here's the most beautiful part. You're not attached. You're not clinging to outcomes or trying to control every step. There's a softness to your power now, a grace. You trust that what is meant for you will find you, because your entire being is in coherence. You've stopped trying to earn your worth. You've stopped outsourcing your value. And in doing so, you've become a magnet for everything that matches your truth. And yet, even now, the journey continues. Because the reward is not a finish line, it's a doorway. A deeper path to walk with even more clarity, more love, more presence. You begin to serve differently. You begin to give from overflow, not depletion. You begin to hold space for others not because you need validation, but because you become a vessel for something higher. You realize that this timeline isn't just about you, it's about the ripple you create. and suddenly your life begins to feel like a prayer answered not just for yourself, but for others too. So I ask you, with all the presence in my being, now that you've become the version of you who receives, can you also become the version who gives? Can you hold your reward not with tight fists, but with open hands, sharing, guiding, illuminating the path for others still walking through their fire? Because that's the real reward. Not just the manifestation, but the meaning. Not just the outcome, but the impact. You've become someone who others look to and feel something awaken inside of them. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. Because you've walked the path with courage. Because you remembered who you are. And so, as you stand now in this new reality, take a breath. Feel the weight of the past entirely lifted. Feel the presence of your soul fully returned. You are home, and everything that is meant for you is already finding its way. You don't have to grasp, you don't have to prove, you just have to be. This timeline of huge reward is not a gift the universe gives randomly. It's a mirror, and now, after everything, you finally see the reflection clearly. You are the reward. You always were. Let this be the moment you stop waiting for your life to begin. Let this be the moment you realize it already has.